understand her decision to step down, and I want to thank her for her service.
Thank you.
Every kingdom divided against itself will be ruined, and every city or household divided against itself will not stand. If Satan drives out Satan, he is divided against himself. How then can his kingdom stand? I do not know. The one thing I do know is that the Liberals are a house divided.
How dare you do that to Jody? How dare you? Don't touch me. I have my baby. Don't! Ow!
Get your baby.
Gotta get up.
My baby is here. Don't touch me. What are you doing? You're gonna assault me? My baby is here. My son.
Were you pressured by the Prime Minister's office? Were you pressured by the Prime Minister's office?
Still working with my lawyer.
How long? Why did you resign?
To get a decision. Are you still a member of the caucus, though? The Liberal caucus, Ms. Wilson?
Do you plan to stay in caucus, Ms. Wilson-Raybould?
I am a Liberal member of Parliament. Thank you.
Are you going to run as a Liberal next election?
His Liberal sources leaked out to the media before that characterized Jody Wilson-Raybould in a negative light, calling her a thorn in the government's side, difficult to work with, that kind of thing. Last Friday, he came out and condemned them, but today he said that he apologized to her in caucus.
I wasn't quick enough to condemn in unequivocal terms the comments and commentary and cartoons made about her last week. They were absolutely unacceptable, and I should have done it sooner.
And frankly, I don't think the government is very coordinated. You know, like you had Jerry Butts' testimony 2 weeks ago, and then the Prime Minister had a press conference that was totally out of sync with Mr. Butts' testimony. If they were talking to each other, you would have thought their messages would be a little bit more aligned. So I think it's possible that they actually are like chickens walking around with their necks.
So where does this go?
Jody Wilson-Raybould was so concerned about the legality of it, she should have spoken to the Prime Minister, and she did not. She refused to listen to 11 interventions from colleagues. She got very bristly and said, well, how do you know about split decision? So she was more concerned about the leak in her office. If she has so little confidence in the Prime Minister, why does she remain a Liberal? She won't open her mind to any suggestions, but she still wants to sit in a group. She goes to cabinet, she's upset she has to wait for a couple of hours before she's let in. How can a caucus member feel free to speak in caucus with impunity when they know that she's probably going to be making notes of everything they say and then going out and speaking to the media about it? Basically set out to, apparently, according to her own father, in a statement that he made 2 weeks ago, the possibility of taking the government down.
Jane Philpott was president of the Treasury Board. She's also served as the federal health minister. Today, Philpott said she has had enough. It is untenable for me to continue to serve as a cabinet minister. There can be a cost to acting on one's principles, but there is a bigger cost to abandoning them. Quite the indictment of the Prime Minister.
I'm thankful that I'm no longer in the game, but I'm furious for my colleagues. Jane Philpott almost put out a challenge to other colleagues in cabinet to join her. And how do you think they will feel when they're sitting in cabinet and if somebody sends a letter saying, well, anybody else who has integrity, quit with me? And Andrew Scheer gets to jump in and say, oh, follow Jane Philpott's request to quit with me. And they're all supposed to be sitting there hanging together.
Sheila Copps, you sound angry about this.
Of course I'm furious.
He and his staff must be in crisis mode right now.
Obviously very difficult for the Prime Minister because what she has said in that letter is damning.
Is this the start of a fracture? What is the rest of Cabinet and possibly the rest of Liberal caucus feeling?
Sometimes they say she could be a bit rigid. Interesting, because that's the same term that was used with Jody Wilson-Raybould. There were some people who knew she was mulling over resigning. But when that cabinet shuffle happened on Friday, people thought she'd put that aside. Because why would you announce this the first business day after yet another cabinet shuffle? He did not try to suggest that perhaps Jane Philpott wasn't very good at her job the way he did with Jody Wilson-Raybould. So that would suggest that they're learning a lesson that didn't play well publicly. He also changed his tone in terms of saying that they are taking the concern and the debate seriously. He hasn't said anything like that before.
We're allowed to have disagreements and debate. We even encourage it.
Well, Justin Trudeau says the SNC Lavalin affair has been a learning experience for him.
And there were certainly an erosion of trust in my office that I absolutely need to learn from and deal from and do better in the future, and that I take very, very seriously.
As the controversy gained momentum, the Prime Minister lost 2 key cabinet ministers and his principal secretary, who's also a close friend.
People going into caucus after that incident last week where you revealed to us about the Prime Minister's behaviour?
I'm going, so yeah.
I have just been notified by my office that Selina Caesar-Chavannes has decided to sit as an independent. I want to thank her for her service to the Liberal Party and to her constituents, and wish her the best in her continued service to constituents.
Ontario Liberal MP Selina Caesar-Chavannes told him she wouldn't be running in this fall's election, and she claims the Prime Minister didn't take it well. She says she was yelled at by a Prime Minister who says he wants his MPs to feel free to approach him with problems anytime, and she's reminding him of that.
I understand that there's a lot of people that supported me that were disappointed in, what I did.
Okay. And what's your message to the people of Whitby?
I don't want to cause them any more grief, especially the ones who are very strong Liberal supporters. I don't want to cause them that grief. It's probably the best thing for me to do is to sit as an independent.
And are you and the Prime Minister okay now, or do you still have issues? Or
yeah, I don't have any comment. I just want to speak to my constituents in Whitby. Thank you.
Clearly, they made it evident to Selina Caesar-Chavannes that she had hurt them. Mm-hmm. And Caesar-Chavannes told her story being bullied by the Prime Minister, and she was gone. And I think Jane Philpott was told, before people knew about the Maclean's article, you are damaging.
Jane Philpott in Ontario caucus meeting got a bit of a dressing down.
Selina Caesar-Chavannes.
Are they concerned about the drip, drip, drip?
The drip, drip, drip.
It's a dribble.
Drip, 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 drip.
This steady drip, drip, drip.
Dribble, dribble, dribble.
A drip, drip, drip.
The slow drip from this story.
Death by Dribble, which has been launched by 2 colleagues.
This keeps coming out in the media.
Top SNC Lavalin executive Neil Bruce brushed aside the Prime Minister's claim that sparing the company from a trial is vital to protecting jobs and its Quebec headquarters. That's simply not the case, Bruce said.
Even with the former minister, Jane Philpott's open attack on the Prime Minister in Maclean's magazine, claiming there is much more to the SNC Lavalin story yet to be told. That was a bombshell. Even when Jane Philpott said all this just 2 days after the budget, blowing the budget off the front pages, undermining the Liberal agenda, angering her Liberal colleagues. Development. Jody Wilson-Raybould says she will provide written submissions to the Justice Committee of evidence, she says, and relevant facts that will clarify her testimony and respond to other witnesses who appeared after her. So the drip, drip, drip of this controversy has now created a flood of problems for the Liberal government.
Philpott went farther even than Wilson-Raybould had ever done, and I think that this is unsustainable for any Prime Minister. What she said was the Prime Minister and his closest advisors are attempting to prevent this story coming out and preventing the truth coming out. Basically, she said it's a cover-up.
The Prime Minister's got a decision to make. Can he tolerate them in caucus or not?
No, he cannot. No Prime Minister I've ever known would have or did have to put up with assaults on his personal integrity by former senior ministers of his government who are still sitting there in caucus. She's giving strength and support to the opposition parties who want to defeat his government. They both are. And so now you're starting to see caucus members, Tom, starting to question these women for doing that. And I can see a caucus gang up on them coming.
In her interview, Jane Philpott was asked straight up, what do you think of Bill Morneau saying that the only reason you talked about this is you're good buddies with Jody Wilson-Raybould? Her answer was revealing. She said, that's insulting. She said, this is about morality. This is about ethics. This is about doing the right thing. And she was insulted that Bill Morneau would let it be known that as far as he was concerned, it was because Jody Wilson-Raybould was one of her girlfriends. That is insulting. It is becoming an issue that affects Mr. Trudeau's credibility.
Are they concerned about the drip, 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 the slow drip from this story and how it's having an impact on the party? Longtime Liberal MP John McKay gave a pretty blunt assessment of how it's been affecting the party.
I think that, members are starting to realize that this has political consequences, and the decisions that have been made by both of them over the last few weeks have hurt members, and there are political consequences. And it's one thing to take a hit from the opposition or circumstances beyond caucus or cabinet. It's another thing to take political hits from your own people.
A storm forcing Liberals in the Trudeau government to pick sides is now dredging up disagreements of the past to have maximum impact on the present.
Specifically, that he had questioned her judgment over recommending a conservative Manitoba judge for the Supreme Court 2 years ago. Well, today, if you were expecting Trudeau to shed more light on the matter, tough luck.
That relationship began to fray over another important decision. A new judge to the Supreme Court of Canada, she wrote a lengthy memo to Trudeau advocating for Joyal's candidacy, causing the Prime Minister to question her judgment. Which brings this to a standoff. Trudeau won't budge while his former ministers say they can't speak freely, but suggest they have much more to tell.
This is 7 weeks of torture for Liberals. Every single day, the story changes and becomes worse.
For days now, a stream of Liberal MPs have argued that Philpott and Wilson-Raybould can use parliamentary privilege to override their oaths of secrecy and tell their story.
I don't think we are, as Liberals, united on this front.
If Wilson-Raybould's written testimony leaves unanswered questions, he says the Prime Minister should budge.
Then yes, I think to get at the truth, there should be a broadening of that waiver.
That's one Liberal's view. The others on the committee either disagree or left without answering the question.
I think there's so much we don't understand.
Well, the credibility of MPs, of Liberal MPs on those committees too, because they take a drumming, as I just had Mona Fortier on the, they take a drumming saying, oh no, we'll let the committee decide, and inevitably the Liberal majority on the committee decides, and it's to shut the committee down.
Huge coincidence that they all just seem to come to that idea. Yeah.
Well, they're coordinated.
How do you know, though, that she said all there is to say? I mean, she's saying she has more to say. Jane Philpott says she has more to say. How are you making the determination that they don't?
Well, I will let them say what they have to say through the means that they have at this time.
I mean, is it about?
But I'd like to agree that we are frustrated in caucus as we are having conversations with 2 colleagues that I still respect and want to work with, but at some point they want and they should say what they have to say, and they have the venue
mechanism,
to do it.
But why not just?
Why not just stop this hemorrhage at some time where they just want to?
It's about the Liberal brand, is what it is.
One moment, let Ms.
Listen to Judy Scrow.
There's no reason that Jane or Jody cannot go into the House of Commons, parliamentary privilege, talk for as long as they want, say anything they want, and there's absolutely no reason that the 2 former ministers can't do that.
And Judy Scrow, where I think was probably at the end of 30-hour marathon, we were all tired of wanting
Should she have said that?
That's not an excuse.
Should she have said that, though?
Well,
Would you have used those words?
Maybe at the time that we were, after 30 hours of vote. I mean, we want to know how Madame Philpott and Madame Wilson-Raybould, will they stay in the team or not? And if so, how do we work as a team?
Do you think they will stay?
I don't know. It's their question. They have to choose at this time.
Okay, I have to leave it there. I'm out of time, but thank you very much to all three of you. Thanks to Mona Fortier, Peter Kent, and Tracy Ramsey.
Thanks, Vashi.
Thank you.
The choice of Supreme Court justices and indeed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada is always a decision by the Prime Minister. Canadians can know that they can have confidence in our institutions, in our judicial system, and I have no further comment to make on this particular story.
Did your office leak the information about the rejection? And if yes, should that person be fired? And if no, do you have an idea who did it?
Canadians can have confidence in our government's respect for the institutions, for the Supreme Court. Canadians have confidence in the strength of our judiciary in this country. I have no further comment to make on this issue.
I'm not revealing any huge secrets. I was one of the people approached. Do you want to talk to Jane Philpott? But there were others too that I've spoken to, other reporters, and this was being rolled out. For people who are purportedly gagged, you know, the victims of a gag order, they have a remarkable success in getting their story out to the media, selected media leaks. There is obviously a concerted and organized effort to make sure that this stays on the agenda.
We have changes daily. It's not going anywhere.
But the fact that they asked not to go to confidence votes.
Yes.
Now, the report, though, too, was that there was a concern by some Liberals, the unnamed Liberals, that they didn't want them there because there would have been bad blood.
They asked not to go,
Yeah.
and the whip granted their request. I guess MPs can debate whether or not the whip should have granted that request. Drip, 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 drip.
Yeah.
And the government doesn't seem to have a handle on how to respond. The thinking in the PMO is that they want to be kicked out, and he doesn't want to make them martyrs.
This is a play, and that he's not going to play his part in it.
It has weakened a prime minister, and that's all that party has, is a prime minister. He's never let a strong team develop.
If you were scanning the Liberal Trudeau cabinet for high-caliber material before her resignation, Jane Philpott would be the solid frame holding up a lot of cracked balsa wood doors and shelving. This is a Liberal seeking re-election who abandoned ministerial perks and pay on principle and speaks out knowing the painful price will be caucus isolation. And imagine the discomfort to Liberals now as they're forced to shut down a second investigation, this one by the Ethics Committee, to probe what two of their own colleagues say is an unfinished story. For that, she becomes a pariah whose principled position will stand in very unfavorable contrast to fellow MPs who are obediently carrying the increasing tattered Liberal flag into an election that they might not win because of her. Perhaps Jane Philpott should simply quit the Liberal caucus. After all, they're not worthy of her.